the company and why your products are different from other products out there? So the Honey Pot is a plant-based feminine hygiene company. We basically focus on everything that a woman needs for her daily and monthly health, revolving around her vagina. Right. So it's external washes, it's wipes, it's pads, it's tampons. You know, I mean, we've got like 35 products. We got 10 new products that are about to launch in Target. So
vagina gotta stay fresh.
I pitched an investor one time, and he asked me, was this just a black product? The answer to the question is no. All vaginas are typically have to be within the same pH range to be healthy. You know, so absolutely not. Our products are for every vagina. It's for your vagina too. So it's for any and every vagina. So yes, you can use the heavy. Yeah.
Let's get to the goddamn shit. Why are the white people hating, Beatrice?
I don't think they're hating, bruh. I think that I was listening to Leon and Thomas on my way in, and I think that you know, the Creator has a master plan, and I think that shit like this happens because it's supposed to happen. Yeah, we shoot a commercial with Target where they highlighted our brand. At the end of the commercial, I said that Honey Pot has to be successful.
You just feel sexier when you manscape. You trim it up nice, and all of a sudden you get this boost of confidence. I go to the barber every 2 weeks to make sure my fade is nice and crisp. The same goes for a fresh feeling below the belt. That's what I do every week or 2 weeks. I trim down there to make sure it's our lawnmower 3. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Truth Wanted.
Dan?
I am your host, Objectively Dan.
Dan.
This is the call-in show where we do live call-ins every Friday night at 7 p.m. Central Time where we talk about what we believe and why.
Dan.
I'm your host.
What are you doing?
That's my name. What's up, Jenna?
If you really want the truth, this is the atheist is here. So
What up?
I'm Jenna Buck, and this is season 23, episode 46 on November 3rd, 2019. This is a show put on by the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion from government. So this is Dan.
Hi, I'm Objectively Dan. I am the host of Truth Wanted, which is another production here at the Atheist Community of Austin, done on Friday night at 7. We go a little bit more out there than AHB calls. We talk a lot about, we've had some Flat Earth calls recently. We talk about Bigfoot, but we talk about religion and all that good stuff too. So if you haven't checked out my show, go check it out. It is called Truth Wanted. You can look that up on YouTube as well. But I am guesting today, so the hands are off the phone for me. This is all Jenna's show today. Matt is out of town and he doesn't know what he's missing. So this is you, all you today.
It's all me now. So let's see how this goes. We're just gonna go straight to calls and see what happens. Okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go with. Let's see. How do I answer? Kenny on.
Yo, what's up?
In Oklahoma.
What's up?
Kenny, can
Right.
you hear me?
I got a
Hi there. How are you?
Pretty good.
I'm gonna put a wire on this
that being
canvas that I
religious
finished the last
requires
time.
extraordinary evidence, and this seems to be confusing to you. Is that correct?
Well, no, it's not confusing to me. I didn't say that Christianity. This is a total misstatement on my phone call. My phone call is it seems like.
And I'm gonna hang it in my dressing room.
The vast majority of the people in the world are spiritual and religious. And since the vast majority of the people are spiritual and religious, that makes it ordinary. So
Does that make it...
Why do I have to give extraordinary evidence of any spiritual religious beliefs I have if being religious and spiritual in the first place is ordinary?
So do you think that the number of people that believe something has any impact on whether or not it's true?
I'm not a bandwagon argument fan. I wouldn't make that fallacy, and I'm not making it now.
I'm just asking you a question.
Ordinary does depend on whether or not a lot of people believe in it.
Okay, so, but what I'm saying is that I think that claiming that there's a God is an extraordinary claim, regardless of how many people believe it. So I'm not even going to bring that into the discussion. I'm not going to talk about whether it's ordinary or normal or anything like that. What I want to know is what's true, and I do think that that is an extraordinary claim, that there is some kind of deity or God or something out there, because there's no evidence for it, regardless of how many people believe it.
So you don't believe that it's bearing on this subject at all to... Are you still talking? I'm sorry. Oh, honestly, I'm watching a delay. Pardon me.
Oh, okay.
I've got your sound turned off because I knew there was a little bit of delay. I didn't realize there was that big of a delay between takes.
It's okay. I'll try to be patient.
Okay. Well, when we look at the leading monotheistic religions, we look at just one of them, Christianity. Christianity seems to have the majority of religious people in the world adhering to it.
Okay.
And
but we just talked about this though, and we just talked about. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. I'm sorry. We just talked about the illegitimacy of the number of people that believe something. And we're not talking about whether something is ordinary, right?
Well, why did you want to shift the discussion?
Because I want to know why you think that it matters that something is ordinary when I think that it matters that something is... Do you think that it matters that something is true? Or do you think it matters what's ordinary?
It's from the standpoint, and you open this whole conversation on discussing Christianity, which wasn't my call, but if you consider Christianity, and I'm just adding that to the equation here, that what we're looking at here is that ordinarily, people as Christians are very satisfied that they have a reason for believing in what they believe in, even though it may be subjective to them and not objective to you or objective to Dan, who's subjectively Dan. Some people don't really care whether people agree with them or not, and some people are just American and believe everybody's on their own spiritual journey or lack of one and can do whatever they want to. I just turned into wonder why it's considered by the atheist community. I mean, every time I watch this show, it sounds like you guys believe that it's extraordinary to be religious or spiritual in general, and I don't see anything extraordinary about that.
So
when it's ordinary for people to be that way, and it even seems like people are wired to be spiritual and religious, that our brains are wired that way, and that the people that aren't that way are actually doing something kind of extraordinary.
yeah, and so Kenny, this quote that you're talking about here, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, it's often attributed to the scientist Carl Sagan, right? And Carl Sagan's real scope with saying this was, I could say that the Earth, the reason why we have earthquakes is because there's, goblins in the sky that bang hammers down on the Earth and make, earthquakes happen. And that would be an extraordinary claim, right? That's an explanation for the events that we see around us. And again, tectonic plates being the explanation for why earthquakes happen, that's still an extraordinary claim. And we do have enough evidence to support, the explanation for this belief. And so what Carl Sagan is kind of pointing out with this is to say that the entire universe was created by a single deity, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, whatever you want to go, that's still an extraordinary claim. That's still an explanation for events that has to compete with other kinds of explanations. And until we find enough evidence for that particular explanation over others, then we have to find, ones that match that of the claim, right, which we would consider extraordinary.
Do you see, so is your question why it seems...
tie in the inflation of the universe with the existence of a Judeo-Christian God? Would that be evidence that God might exist?
Well, so if your specific claim was God used the inflation of the universe as part of the creation structure, then maybe, yes, but we would still have to establish the existence of the God, right? Because
if I attributed some sort of thing or energy or something that has the characteristics of God to that, and the consensus of astrophysicists was that this exists and fits the standard model of the Big Bang or whatever, wouldn't that be very strong?
Maybe so, but does Christianity itself actually support the inflation of the universe? I mean, really think about this. The inflation of the universe is what you're talking about. But this is a modern idea, right? Christians were not talking about this until scientists actually observed it itself, right? So we can almost, I mean, this is almost a retroactive kind of deal that we're talking about here. See, like, you can fit a lot of these explanations into a Christian model, but you have to have it with the conceit that Christianity did not come up with this, right?
I would have to say that in 17 different instances of the Hebrew Old Testament, the verb for stretching, as in stretching out the heavens like a curtain, is pretty explicit as a process that had a time that began in the past and continues on, and or can continue on. Therefore, if God stretches out the heavens and dark energy is the culprit behind that and is necessary to be invoked by astrophysics, and yet it seems to have a similar nature to God being invisible, indetectable, something you can't see.
But does that mean that it does? If it seems like it has a connection to a God, does that mean that it does?
Well, does it mean that dark energy does inflate the universe, even in science? We can't even establish that, as far as I know.
Yes, and when we do establish a dark energy, are we going to have to attribute that to the Bible as well? You see, because
you establish a dark energy by detecting it.
Well, yes, but the point with this is
a physical phenomenon we can detect and analyze.
When the ancient Jewish rabbis were writing the Talmud and were looking at these texts, I don't think they were talking about these advanced cosmological concepts that we're talking about now. I think we're retrofitting some modern scientific ideas onto an ancient text.
Okay.
I don't even think that the cosmological model that they had of the Earth and the universe was even compatible to what we have today. So, yeah.
I don't believe in coincidences in science, and I don't think any scientist does. The fact that this is compatible with Scripture is really the only thing anyone who believes and wants to be scientific and rational with their faith at all has to do. It's just find a common denominator that fits. Or you can say that since Japanese physicists have converted information into energy, you could say, well, maybe the Logos could be the forerunner of the Big Bang, the Logos, the pre-existent Christ, which would be a great deal of the right quality of information if he contains all the information of creation in him, which is what Christianity has always taught, that the Father actually created through the Son. And so I don't really see any problems here for Christianity. It seems like Christianity is very compatible, very reasonable.
Well, if we're talking strictly about the Bible also talks about giants, ghosts. I mean, it talks about all kinds of other
zombies,
things.
the Walking
resurrections,
Dead,
angels. I mean,
slavery.
If we're just looking at minute ancient Hebrew words,
fire-breathing water dragons.
Expansion is
The
kind
Bible
of
talk about all
the
kind of
inflation
shit
that we see now with the universe. I mean, yeah, we could do this all day, but there's lots of other broad concepts that just wouldn't even be touched by science today.
We can talk about
right?
angels a little bit if you'd like to, since
I don't want to. Hold on. I don't want to go in this.
Give you evidence that angels
Kenny.
exist.
Kenny.
think that's good.
Possible.
Kenny. I don't want to go down, just going down this rabbit hole, that rabbit hole. I want to know. It says that you don't think that it's an extraordinary claim. Is that correct? That a God exists.
All right, I'm about to go hang
this. Is that
this.
what you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't believe it's an extraordinary claim to claim that God exists, a monotheistic God that exists, and also considering the vast majority of religious people in the world are monotheists.
So,
all right, guys. So I'm
So I guess this kind of.
I'll start a live stream on the phone.
Yeah, it could be a bit of a subjective.
So going with your perspective, if we're holding
Do I have some nails in here?
Kenny.
All right, so
if we're defining extraordinary,
I'm gonna start a live stream on the phone so y'all can come downstairs
what,
with me while I hang
a
this
certain
painting up.
number of people believe, the opposite of what a certain number of people believe, then maybe we can say that using that definition, it's not extraordinary. But when we're saying that, do you think that God is like supernatural or anything outside of nature or anything outside of what we have tactile, proof for? Do you think that there's that's what your God is? Do you think it's outside of our? Sorry?
Do you believe that when a tsunami hits a beach and wipes out a bunch of people, that it's right to call it an act of God?
I don't know why you would make that connection to a God.
Well, often it's called an act of God, just like tornadoes are called an act of God.
I mean, I could call it an act of fairies, but why would I have any reason to say that?
Well, because that's common. It's ordinary.
So just because a lot of people think that, does that have any bearing on whether or not it's actually true?
Whether or not God did something is mainly viewed as extraordinary or supernatural is because man isn't the one that has power over it or can control it.
It's called extraordinary because this God has abilities. Hold on. I'm trying to see if I'm following you, Kenny. Can you listen to me and tell me if I'm following you correctly?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I do that. I repeat things and kind of think about it as I'm saying it, trying to see if I'm following along. So just because your claim is that a God can do things outside of the abilities of man, that's what makes it. So do you agree that it's extraordinary then, if that's how you're defining it?
Actually,
most people look at the fact that
put that hammer in my damn pocket and my damn pants started coming down because I ain't got them tied up.
Or that man can do it or has the power to do it. That's when I look at something extraordinary. It's extraordinary in my own conception.
All right, guys,
how that
I got the phone.
I'm
about to
how it happens.
So
we still live
agree
on the phone too. So you about to go downstairs and
know how the miracle's done in the first place.
In the dressing
using
room.
that definition of your ordinary, which is different from the first one, do you
That's
think
the definition of not knowing. That definition of having an agnostic knowledge of miracles.
that's the definition of having agnostic knowledge of miracles? I don't know what that means.
You can't necessarily know how God did miracles.
Then why do you know that God did miracles? If you don't know how and you can't.
Miracles are events, and if events happen, it's a historical problem.
But how do you know that any God has anything to do with anything outside of the abilities of man?
Well, if he's appealed to, and then the answer to that appeal seems to be that event, then that's a direct connection that maybe.
Why do you think that that's an answer? Why an event is an answer for something?
Well, I don't believe an event is an answer. I believe that when you invoke a actor, an agent, and then there's an event that
invoke an actor or agent. What does that mean?
Every day, commonly in life.
Hold on. What does it mean to invoke an agent?
Well, when I say invoke, when I state that I ask an agent to do something, and then the agent does, then something occurs exactly the way I asked for it to occur.
So if I ask,
that gives indication maybe that agent was involved, and that at least gives me data in that direction, and I have evidence in that direction. I don't have evidence that another agent did it because I never asked anybody else to do it.
So if I am leaving here after this show and I ask the God of the fairies to get me home safely, and then I get home safely, is that any evidence that a God of fairies exists?
No, because because you're talking about something very ordinary. Getting home safely happens more often than not.
Okay, it's not very common that I leave this show. That I'm leaving.
It's very common for you guys to be so naive.
Okay, now if we're going to start name calling and insulting each other, we're not going to get very far. I'm sincerely trying to understand you.
I've been on this show.
I'm sorry?
I've been insulted every time I've been on the show by Matt Dillahunty.
Well, I'm not Matt Dillahunty.
I'm not mad either. I got too much hair to be mad.
I haven't insulted you yet, so I expect the same respect.
Myself, okay.
Okay, so let's not do that. I just want to figure out why you don't think that it's fairies, you think it's a god.
Well, if I ask God to do it and it happens, then why should I believe it's fairies?
I think we're missing each other a little bit.
My point is that it's who you ask. Like, let me give you an example. My
Well,
son,
hold on. I want to stick with this because I don't actually think that fairies are the reason that I get home. I don't actually
well, then
pray to
why
fairies
would anyone attribute it to that?
because I like fairies.
Oh, you like fairies?
Yeah, I like fairies. So that's why I'm using that as an example, because I could say that because fairies make me feel good, that is, that I believe in them and that I think that they're there and I pray to them and they get me home every time I ask them to get me home. So if I wanted to believe that, I could probably convince myself of that. But what I'm asking you is, does that have any bearing on whether or not the fairies are getting me home? And does that mean that I should believe that the fairies are what's getting me home versus me getting me home? Right? So I could use that with a god. How do you know that it's a god? How would I know if it's fairy? Does that make sense why I'm using that?
You would have to have a quality of energy or action that occurred there that could only be attributed to fairies.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
No, well, he's got a point though. So,
What does
like,
that mean?
if do we have that same quality of evidence in respect to the Christian God?
Quality of evidence.
Sure, I mean,
think we do. I mean,
yeah.
Christ holds all things together, and dark matter is a lot like God in nature, so maybe Christ does hold all
Well,
things.
if you say, but that's a claim, right? Christ holds all things
A
together.
claim that all things are being held together by gravity and that the major culprit of that is dark matter?
But
That
we're not
is-
saying
well,
that because
well-
gravity a god.
Well, that is a claim, and it's a claim that can be supported by evidence, right? So if we could,
Absolutely. It's
yes.
not, it's
So
every reputable astrophysicist.
So what is the evidence of the claim that Christ holds all things together?
Well, the revelation that he does.
Well, okay.
Wait.
Well, I don't.
That's not evidence.
If God,
So-
say that revelation isn't evidence. It's evidence if it's stated, then it's later determined to be true.
We haven't determined it to be true in the first place, though.
Really
you see, this is a
weird.
bit circular. Right,
Yeah.
so we figured out that, okay, so your understanding of dark energy is that gravity holds things together. I'm asking you, how do we know that Christ holds all things together? And your response to me was revelation, that he does.
That's part of it.
Okay, what's the other part?
It always has to be the revelation of Scripture if I'm going to tie it directly in.
So let me ask you this then. If we did not have Scripture, let's say the Bible was not accessible to you or me, would we still be able to determine that Christ holds all things together?
Yeah, because Christian traditions existed before the canon.
Let's say Christian traditions are out the window. What else do we got?
Oh, well, I have absolutely no intention of talking about reality at all without the Christian religion.
So
Wait,
you
hold
see,
on.
You talk about reality.
But you
How can you
understand
not talk
that
about
your
reality?
understanding of reality, of how things work, is based on the word of mouth of people,
All
and
right.
not
You're back in
observations
the
of nature
studio.
by themselves. It's always going to be somebody's written word or somebody's spoken word to you. It's never going to be something that you can access yourself, right?
I mean, we could use any religion. We
Sure.
could use the Muslim religion.
All scriptural revelation is, in the first place, is a record of God's action to man. It's more of a record than it is the actual revelation itself. The revelation itself is what God does.
So let's say if that record doesn't exist, like Dan says, do we have anything to go off of that has reality and like right
Sure.
now,
Sure.
other than what happened thousands of years ago?
Yeah.
Okay, what do we have?
There's things in
Today, your information is more exposed than ever. When you shop, bank, or browse online, you're vulnerable to cybercriminals. More threats demand more protection. That's why Norton and LifeLock are now one, combining device security, VPN for online privacy, and LifeLock identity theft protection, backed by $1 million protection package. Get all-in-one protection on Norton.com.
Alright, so got that done. Now back to this painting.
The following ad is intended only for people who are serious about growing their YouTube channel. If this doesn't apply to you, please skip.
Hey, what up?
Hello and welcome to the Atheist
This dude
Experience.
stay at
Today
work.
is Sunday, November 11th, 2018, and I'm your host, Tracy Harrison. With me today is my co-host, Aaron Ross.
How do you do?
I'm so excited you're here today.
I need something to eat, but
Experience is a production of
I
the
ran out of
Atheist
protein
Experience,
shake, and I don't feel like fixing breakfast. It's almost lunchtime, actually, ain't it? What time is it? It's 10:30. What can I eat, yo? I might go fix a bowl of cereal real quick.
We're having some kind of barbecue something, I was told. So we're doing Texas barbecue. Makes sense, right? And
It's what you do.
yeah, and I think it'll go well with the godless beers. If we have these godless beers that someone gave us, and it's like, I think people are used to hearing me drink and do other speeches, but I think drinking and doing tea is the first here today. So we have godless beers. We'll see how that works. So we also have a couple of quick announcements. We still need volunteers. So we're asking for volunteers for social media moderation and promotion. If you're interested in volunteering online, you can email socialmedia@atheist-community.org. If you're interested in volunteering locally for local events and Austin Community Service, stop by the Free Thought Library during open hours, or email Megan, MEGAN, @atheist-community.org. Additionally, we do still have an open job posting for Director of Operations. More information on all our social media platforms is available for that, and also at our main website. Links to the job description or the description itself should be included in the post. That didn't sound quite right, but links to the job description or the description itself should be included in the post. Anyway, there's links to the job description in the post, and you can email, November is the deadline for applications, and who to contact and where to send your application should be available with that information. And additionally, I was told that Saturday, November 24th at 11 a.m., Hemet Mata is going to be our featured at the ACA Speaker Series, which is going to be held at a place called Duo Works, and that is on Business Park Drive. So I would encourage you to Google that if you're not familiar with it. I had to ask. I think it's up there right now on the screen, so you can see the address to that event. Invite everyone to come out. If you have heard of the Friendly Atheist, that would be Hemet, and I definitely have enjoyed some of his talks, so I encourage everybody to come and see that. Additionally, I was told that we are going to host a Friendsgiving Day at the library on Thanksgiving Day.
All right, what up, guys?
More information is going to come, so please watch
Bad.
social media for
What up, bro?
details. But this is going to be held Thanksgiving Day for folks who don't have plans for the day. So if you don't already have plans
Cereal.
for Thanksgiving, or you don't foresee that you're going to have plans for Thanksgiving, feel free to come on down to the Free Thought Library, where we're going to be hosting a day for people who want to come out and just have some community and some food and just hang and socialize. So
And maybe just you want to avoid the typical traditional family arguments.
maybe you don't want to have plans for Thanksgiving and you come out for that. Yeah, sure. Also encourage people to respond to our blog at freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. And just as a note, when you post your first post and you've never posted before, it does require moderation. That can take a few days sometimes. But hang in there, your post will go through. Don't keep posting. Just wait for that first one to go through. And once it does, you can post at will. You don't have to wait for them to be moderated every single time. But FYI, I do encourage some callers to go to the blog and post their information at certain points. So if that happens, that's the rules. Just be aware of it. And I think that's everything I have for announcements, which is quite a lot. And it was quite a lot considering we had no special announcements when I first walked in. And so welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much.
It's great to have you here. And like I said, I know that our audience is super excited.
Well, thank you. It's been years since I've been on this show. And it's funny, the last time I was on, my daughter came. Well, you remember when it was in the old studio?
Yes.
Yeah, and my daughter was sitting in the studio audience, and the sad thing is that every caller we had that day was people that share the same opinion we do. And they're, I just wanted to say what you're doing is really great, and you keep doing really well. That's good. Thanks, but that's not great TV.
And I will say we do have a good lineup here today. We've got about half and half, a split it looks like from the caller list. So as usual, we prioritize the theistic callers, and so that shouldn't be a problem. But yes, I mean, I do understand 100% that, Aaron has tons of fans that would love to call and speak to him and take that opportunity, but this is not the show for that. So Please let him do his thing with counter-apologetics and, his specialty, I think, paleontology, and that will be really good.
Don't treat me like I'm all that special. I'm in awe next to you.
No, don't even. So anyway, there was something that I talked to you about earlier prior to the show.
Yes.
We had a caller that called in last time I was on 2 weeks ago, and that call went round and round, and I could not make any headway, and finally just dropped the call and moved on to another call. But the concern was sort of several steps. So first of all, they called in and asked why I did not accept biology as evidence of God. They seemed to be confused about the idea of personal opinions of biologists who are theistic versus their professional perspectives on what is demonstrable using their field of science.
Mm-hmm.
They were also confused about the idea of using peer review not being sort of the end of the line. So you publish a paper on something like irreducible complexity, but then there's peer review, and then the community of peers in the field of biology looks at that paper and they evaluate that paper and they decide whether or not to adopt that as a consensus view or not. And that matters. And the person was very surprised that I seemed to put so much weight on consensus in a scientific field. And so I was hoping that you, with your background in paleontology, could kind of help shed some light on maybe a better explanation or a more clear explanation where I was unable to sort of get that point across.
What I wanted to say in regard to that was we have a number of what they call theistic evolutionists. We have the Christians who are scientists, but they still perform the science. I mean, and they have like Kenneth Miller, who's literally a textbook author in biology, and he was the star witness in Kitzmiller versus Dover. So he was arguing against all of the intelligent design people. So anybody that had tried to publish anything in support of intelligent design, like Michael Behe had several things, and this didn't all come out in the court. But Kenneth Miller didn't just shoot him down in the courtroom. He had already shot down a number of other intelligent design arguments just in the field of science, just in the peer-reviewed material. So he's showing that just because you can, and it often goes back to the God of the gaps. They want to say that if you can't explain something, then I've explained it by magic, you know. So anything science can't explain, we explain by magic. But of course, that's you have to imply that this thing that you're proposing actually exists.
And magic's not an explanation; it's just a non-explanation.
Exactly.
That you label it.
So then you have to show that if we're talking about possibilities, some people want to talk about improbability, the argument from improbability fallacy, where what are the odds that everything could have come together by chance? What are the odds that I did everything that I did yesterday in the exact order that I did them yesterday, at the exact time that I did them yesterday? It's absolutely impossible, when you work it out like that. But this is people that they're not trying to reason a result. They want to believe something, and so they think that if they don't, it works out in a weird way that if they don't know, they know, in a strange sort of a way. And if you don't know, they know. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, that their belief is bolstered. If you don't know anything, then they can claim that they know it. And
sure.
So it's all part of that God of gaps.
So
when we were talking about the biologists, many of them will have a religious belief before they usually before they ever get into their career where they achieve their doctorate degrees. There are a number of people who like Robert T. Bacher, who's a paleontologist who was cited for Jurassic Park. He was one of the consultants there. He's a Pentecostal preacher.
Okay.
Still accepts evolution, right? Kenneth Miller, as we mentioned, and then Francis Collins, who was director of the Human Genome Project, doesn't buy any of the, it doesn't buy that the entire population was ever reduced to just Adam and Eve. He says that's impossible, but he still believes the rest of the biblical narrative, as long as most of it can be treated as metaphorical. But when all these people come to these positions because they already had the religious belief before they learned their degrees, there's a bit of a difference than if you have the data that implies there's a God. And this person that you were talking to says, how can you not look at biology as evidence of God? Because it doesn't indicate a God. That
was my response.
That's the big problem. Yeah, it's like, so you can't. It's not that these people ever say that that there is this biological feature or this factor or this function or whatever implies that there's an intelligent designer. The best argument they ever get is science can't explain it, therefore God. And even in those cases, every one of those times has been refuted. And when somebody doesn't understand the consensus, they think that that science is established by democracy. But if in fact you have 100 scientists in a given field, and 98 of them say that these two guys are wrong, and the two guys that say they don't have a reason to say they're right, they just assume their own conclusion, you're going to need more than that. You need the experts in the field to say, yes, this is actually indicated, and this is how it's indicated. See the hand of God however they want to see it.
I think I used the example of plumbing, but if my plumber said he sees God in the field of plumbing, it doesn't mean that that's actually indicated. Whether he sees it or not is not really an aspect of his plumbing. I didn't mean it that way. But anyway.
You see how the studio audience right away went there.
I don't know, so anyway.
Okay.
Thank you for that. And do you have anything to add or anything that's upcoming that you'd like to mention or promote? And I just want to say that at the blog, I did post the show post, and I also mentioned your book, and I also mentioned your YouTube channel, and I do have links to both at the blog. So just FYI, those are already promoted at the blog. But is there anything else?
I have a speaking page that I will be doing a Darwin Day presentation in Denver, Colorado, and I've got a couple of other things that are coming, but I don't remember off the top of my head, so I'm not going to plug anything.
Okay.
I don't remember the dates or the times or anything.
Maybe they can check your channel for more information?
Yeah, exactly, okay. And links below.
Okay.
That's what I usually say.
All right, that works. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start with callers, and we will go to... I think it's Johanna in California. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, you're on with Tracy and Aaron. What's on your mind today? It says you have an argument for the existence of God.
Yeah. So, firstly, I'm going to start with a basic epistemic principle, or set of epistemic principles. It's the PSR, Principle of Sufficient Reason, plus the Law of Identity. And we're going to get a little tool out of this. I'm going to call it explanatory continuity. And so this is basically where you start an argument, any argument, with a set of premises. And, when you put that in like a logic sense, each premise has terms in it, right? Like A, B, and C, to get an abstract form. And then you follow through a series of, steps to get the conclusion, correct?
Okay.
So now, if the argument is, there's other ways an argument can be invalid, but the basic way that an argument, an argument can be invalid is if there are terms in the conclusion that don't show up in the premises. Someone kind of like put terms in, the non sequitur dump from the premises to step along the way of the conclusion, not the conclusion itself. So if you have A, B, and C in the premises, and you end up with D, E, and F in the conclusion, you know that someone made a non sequitur fallacy along the way, right?
I have a question. If somebody puts forward a premise that is incorrect, but the people that are hearing the premise don't know it's incorrect, and the person putting it forward doesn't know it's incorrect, and they all accept it, would that make a problem?
That would be a problem, but with the second part of this argument that I'm going to get to, you'll see very quickly why that's not an issue in this case.
Oh, okay.
It's something that literally everyone agrees with. Or I'm pretty certain pretty
Right, I guess what I'm asking is, a lot of times, for example, people will put forward a hypothesis that sounds very good. Like everything about it seems like it should happen the way that you would expect it would happen.
The premises are off.
Right, but then you test it and you get this surprising result that isn't what anyone expected, right? Because there's something, and then they have to investigate to see, well, what is it about what we thought should happen that made it not happen? Because everything we know points to this, and then later when you investigate, you find out something new that you didn't know before because
there's this other additional component that fits in.
Because you test it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify just what we're talking about. I mean, we're obviously not talking about a Bible God, right? So you're talking about something...
That's actually an interesting thing. If you want to get into that, and this would be... You know me, Aaron, from Facebook. I work on your PEP. You might not know that I'm actually J.P. Morgan's student, or former student. I graduated now. But argument, I could actually... I looked at it in comparative religion. Once you get past this, once you get to the conclusion of it, you can go from a number of different places with it, which are beyond the scope of this argument. And one of these is very interesting because you can have a physics equivalent to this metaphysics, okay? It's an idealist metaphysics that I argued for. You can have a physics equivalent of it, and from the physics equivalent, actually demonstrate of a fallen state, not just described in Christianity, but as described in the details of it, as described in 6 separate beliefs.
Maybe we should just let you start.
Okay, but that was actually like a whole lecture. I want to do like a whole video lecture on that, which would
get your own show.
Your own show. I'm not going to do that here. But actually, it'll demonstrate that that part could demonstrate that God could. There's a basis for what people are calling God and what people are calling theology and comparative religion.
People are so fucking long-winded. Like he said, get to the fucking point.
The only reason I asked was, are we going to try to, support the idea that there was a global flood and talking snakes and, a firmament and all that? Okay, good.
Yeah, I think. Well, if I was thinking there was a global flood, there'd be a serious problem with me being on your phylogeny project.
Granted.
Anyway, so are you guys familiar with the Kantian phenomenon-Noumenon problem?
Sounding an awful lot like philosophy, so I'm just going to roll my eyes back in my head and turn it over to Tracy.
No, don't turn it over to me. My thing is, just go. What are these premises? Let's lay it out. Let's start.
Okay, so in problem of external skepticism, you have, very basic, this is another word for it, you have your perceptions, which is what Kant called the phenomenon, right? What you see around the world, the phenomenology of it, the way it seems to you.
People have perceptions.
And
Next.
there is, what?
I said people have perceptions. Next.
Okay, beyond the perceptions, though, is what they call the noumenon, which is supposedly the mind-independent external reality.
Okay, there's objective stuff. Next.
Yes. And the next question is, how do you get from, we always assume the objective stuff is there, but now, of course, we take that for granted and we would agree that's there, but in order to actually, for that to possibly be the case, there has to be a way to bridge epistemically the phenomenon and the noumenon. There has to be a way to actually view that there is something beyond your perceptions. Of course, speaking, most people don't. For practical purposes, it really doesn't matter because we just go about the world pragmatically as though that's the case anyway. And number two, if we tried to sit down and figure out how to solve it, it would be very difficult to, really tackle, right?
Right, brain in the jar. Next.
However, if our perceptions are to correlate to a world outside of our senses, then there has to be, in principle, some logical explanation bridges the perceptions with the world behind them, even if we don't know it and we will never know it. And for that kind of argument to be logically valid, there can't be terms in the conclusion that do not fall from the premises, correct?
I don't know. Keep going.
That was the explanatory. Okay, just making sure everyone follows. Now, the thing about this is, the terms, when you start, the premises you start with are your phenomenology. You have nothing other than your phenomenology to deal with, okay?
I got to tell you, every time I hear you say phenomenology, I think do.
Oh gosh, that's dated yourself so much. Dated yourself.
Sorry.
Anyway,
So how do we perceive?
What?
So the question here is, how do we perceive?
How do we perceive? How is it that our perceptions correlate to a world beyond them? Now, when you think about this, all you have as premises in this case are, perceptions, your phenomenal perceptions, which are purely defining first-person phenomenal terms. Mental, right? So now the thing is that.
Well, I mean, it's mental is physical, right?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to the definition of physical a little bit later because the physical is what's in the noumenon, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that there's physical stuff, and I don't know of other stuff.
Well, the thing is you do know of other stuff.
Oh, okay.
Let's say other stuff. Let's get rid of the word mental versus physical for now, because that will bring into a whole bunch of things that could be argued to be question-begging either way, and really actually kind of distract from the whole. Let's just say your perceptions are physical of them, and they are first person, right?
Right.
And furthermore, that's all you know. You can say mental is physical.
you want, and that's fine.
Yeah, sir. Soft solipsism. I'm with you.
Okay, so
Well, this is exactly why I turn over the philosophy to you.
Okay. All you have is your mental perceptions, and then to get to the conclusion, which is the noumenon, or the objective world, the terms in the premises have to be the same as the terms in the conclusion. Now, new terms appearing in the conclusion that don't show up in the premises, right? Like A, B, and C can't lead to D, E, and F. D, and E, and F are, irreducibly D, E, and F.
Yeah, if we get to that and it's a problem later, you can explain it to us why it doesn't work.
Okay.
All right.
So A, B, and C in this case are just your perceptions, your mental first-person perceptions.
Okay.
And maybe other mental things as well. It could be other minds, perhaps. Things of a first-person category.
Which would still be objective for the individual subject.
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure I understand this.
Basically, we perceive things, and there appears to be objective reality, but it's basically taken on a tentative basis because we have no choice.
Okay, and what you're saying, what the caller is saying, is that this argument is going to convince me there's a God.
Well, we're getting there.
It's your idealism.
We're getting there.
It's going to convince me of idealism. That reality isn't even real.
Well, it's real, but this is objective idealism, which is a different category than subjective idealism.
Oh, I'm sorry,
there
objective?
Is beyond your senses.
I'm sorry, you just broke my brain when you said objective. You said objective idealism.
Yep.
So that I made up everything. I made up everything, including you, and you can confirm that I made you up.
No, what it says is that there is a world beyond our senses, but that world is not that it's like subjective in the sense that it's just subjective to me. It's all my hallucination. What it's saying is there is a world beyond our senses, but that world is comprised of entities that have a mental ontology or a mental essence. Comprised of more minds that you're interacting with, or more.
So, like this beer I'm drinking is a mind.
Yeah. Now that when we get to that a little bit later, there's.
I mean, that's what you're saying, right? That these things that I think are outside me are actually existing with their own minds.
Some of them are actually microscopic. This is
Wait, what?
Donald Hoffman from UC Irvine, and he has this very.
Yeah, let's just keep going. Let's keep going with these things.
The question is.
You're good. I'm sorry. I keep saying.
It sounds like a radical hypothesis.
I take full responsibility for sidetracking it, but let's go ahead and.
I don't know where the question of whether the beer is outside your mind made the beer microscopic.
I don't know, but it has its own mind.
Well, the microscopic mind. The reason I brought that up.
It has a microscopic mind.
I don't know. We're getting there.
Donald Hoffman has this argument, this is a theory actually, and this is kind of. I was going to bring this up at the end because it's like a.
It's cool.
The conclusion is quite radical, and I wanted to.
Yeah. Go ahead and do your thing.
Logically, but it's quite radical.
So there's perception. There's an assumption of objective stuff, and then there's a question of how we perceive the objective reality, and then next.
Okay, so in order to solve that question, there has to be some explanation.
Solve what question? Wait, is there a question?
That was my question. Was there a question?
Well, the question is, how do you know that your subjective perceptions are corresponding to an objective world beyond?
And I thought we agreed that you can't know that you just have to take it.
Well, you know that practically probably, but there has to, in order for it to be possible for there to be that, like if we were going to assume that it's not just solipsism, but there really.
What else would you assume?
Well, this is a solipsist. Now, of course, no one is.
Right, but let's say I'm a solipsist and I reject this reality that I perceive. What else do I assume?
Well, okay, so what else would you assume beyond that? You wouldn't. However, the thing is that.
Right, and then I would just die, right?
This is an argument for the existence of idealist mental reality.
But it seems like we're kind of hitting a brick wall because if we're going to try to, because we're already saying, I agree with you that the acceptance of the objective reality is like a tentative thing, that you do it because it's sort of the only option. I'm with you 100% on that.
Right.
So then the question of how when we get to
a condition of that option, right?
Right.
A condition of that is because of this, how this problem is set up, is that if there is an objective world beyond our senses, then that objective world must be comprised of items with mental ontology.
Keep going, because I'm not there yet. So good, keep going.
If there's an existence beyond our mental perceptions.
I think he's skipping to the conclusion, and he still has more premises to go through. Am I right?
Yeah. Well, I gotta explain how I would say the premises are mostly set up right now.
I just wanted to understand what I just heard.
Yeah, you heard it right.
Okay.
It sounds radical. I know. I can defend it though.
Radical's a word.
Scientific angle as well as sonically, as well as from a philosophic angle.
Okay.
Just using the philosophical.
Because I think I just want to say right now, and maybe you can address this when you're doing your premises. How we assuming that the objective reality is what we perceive, which is kind of where we're stuck, right? I mean, we have to kind of assume that it's real. So we assume that the subjective reality is real, and so we operate with it based on what we consider to be demonstrated, which is, again, like our perceptions either directly or indirectly through mechanisms that can measure, correct?
Right.
Okay, so then what happens is we have things like I hear stuff. And the stuff that I hear, we can measure through sound waves, right? So the thing that, something is, like, two things get hit, and then we have sound waves that travel, and we can measure them, and they hit my ears, which then are triggered.
I want to quick point out a subtle problem here, okay?
Okay.
And that is, yes, these things correspond to, like, there's a difference between qualia and the things.
I don't accept qualia.
Okay, difference between, forget the word qualia.
Okay.
First-person perceptions and, like, for example, when I look at, like, the color red, right?
Okay.
I see redness there, but what I don't see is light of, a certain number of nanometer wavelength. For magnetic waves of a certain number,
But that is redness, isn't it?
Well, that corresponds to redness. It's not the... Let me put it this way.
That's what redness is. If it wasn't there, there would be no red. I mean, redness is that.
It has to correspond to the...
Suppose that you would have someone with synesthesia, for example.
Okay.
And that person may actually, in this case, not hear the color,
Okay, so what you're saying is... Okay, I just want to clarify. There's a thing called redness, which is on the spectrum of visible light. And you're saying, well, what if you have synesthesia? And if you have synesthesia, then your brain is rewired such that you perceive smells as sounds and so forth. So you can't perceive anything correctly. So how would you know whether it sits on...
That's the question. I mean, how do we know that maybe our minds are not...
We don't. And we've already conceded that. We don't.
Okay, well, this is not the external skepticism thing. This is the issue of... I'm trying to demonstrate that redness correlates to,
Well, no, it's like she said. That's what redness is defined as being within this wavelength.
Right. I mean, this person is an anomaly for sure. I get it. And you're right. It's definitely worth looking into why somebody has this odd experience of having a perception of red, just like dreams, right? We could just go to dreams. I have all kinds of perceptions, but I have all kinds of perceptions in dreams that are just sort of mental projections of things that don't really exist, right? I mean, as far as our...
But when you're in the dream, the experience, which is the first person, I'm trying to grade it as not the aspect, but the first person subjective aspect of it.
Right, but we would accept that based on this sort of, hey, we tentatively have to accept reality, and based on how we evaluate that reality based on that initial acceptance, the dream then becomes non-objective, right? It just becomes something my brain is putting out at night. Like, I'm not really holding a lemon, I'm just dreaming that I'm holding a lemon.
But the thing is, when we're dealing with the phenomenon, none of it is objective anyway. It is all just the first person.
Right, so my brain can reproduce these things like yellowness for the lemon, even though it's not really getting an objective input of yellowness. So I understand what you're saying there, and I agree that brains can do that.
Okay, so we'll just isolate the subjective aspect of yellowness. Either be an objective 100-some nanometer wavelength of light, or it could be a mental perception produced by the brain.
I think I'm going to have to go with the metric.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that my brain is reproducing that metric in the dream.
Okay, or you could do the synesthesia. Well, let's focus on the first-person aspect of it, okay?
So the perception.
The perception. The weight of a certain number of
the perception.
Nanometer wavelength, but we'll just focus on the subjective aspect of it for now, and that is all that's in the premises of the phenomenology. In the premises, the A, B, and C of the premises,
right.
The first person aspect is like the first person aspect of yellow is the A, the first person aspect of the blue is the B, and the first person aspect of C is the red. See what they are objectively in the physical world.
So are we going to go with the idea that we perceive an assumed objective reality, or are we going to say that all goes out the window because dreams?
Well, we're going to go out the window as a provisional for the purposes of demonstrating that if there is an objective reality, then therefore certain implications follow from that.
So he's arguing for, and I'm still having a problem with the broken brain bit on the objective idealism. Because I don't know a definition of idealism that can be objective.
Okay, well look up, okay, let me give you an example. Well, this is called, you can look up objective idealism on Wikipedia, it's actually a real thing. But another example...
I'm not looking up Wikipedia during the show.
Conscious realism, which is Donald Hoffman's term, who describes the world as made of conscious agents. He then identifies each conscious agent as a little wave function.
Okay, so wait. You're pushing him toward his conclusion, and then we're just taking longer. So what's happening is, okay, so what we've got now is we have perceptions, we have objective stuff that is assumed, and then we have the capacity to perceive things that we also assume are not part of the objective reality. That's where we're at this point. Right?
Okay, so doing here is I'm starting with just the part that is the subjective first-person aspect of it.
The perception.
And we'll suspend all judgment as to, you know...
Let's just call that the perception.
Right. So
we're looking at the perception.
Okay, so now if there is a world beyond our senses, then there has to be a way to get from the premises in the phenomenon conclusion of the external world in the noumenon.
Right. You're saying, how do we perceive objective reality?
Did we really just spend 15 minutes or more asking the question, how do we know if we know anything?
Well, know anything objective. What I'm trying to say is we do know them, but a precondition of us being able to know them tells us something about their ontology.
This is a lot of words to say we perceive stuff. We accept there's an objective reality, although we cannot demonstrate that as like real, and that sometimes our perceptions happen without the objective inputs. I mean, that's literally what we've said.
No. Actually, let me state really fast the premises, the conclusion, and then maybe it'll give you a different way of seeing what I'm arguing. And
I thought I was a verbose person, like really. I thought I was like the most,
It's philosophy, it's usually better when it's like a video.
It doesn't have to be this complicated, though. You can literally just say, we perceive things. We make an assumption.
Make it simple, okay? I'll say
Too late!
And then just pick it apart. All right, so we have only the first-person subjective aspect to start with, which is the premises, and the premises is the argument, and the terms in those premises, A, B, and C, are the subjective elements, okay? Therefore, if we are able to get to a conclusion from those premises, which that conclusion would be the noumenon or the objective world.
I just don't care. It's like I was mostly. Wait a minute. We're at 5 o'clock.
Need to be first person.
I don't know if you can't hear me, maybe, but
he's reading.
Yeah, right. We need to move along at this point because this is way too many words to say something so simple.
Compact form so you can pick it apart.
Yeah, put it in the blog, right? There's a freethoughtblogs.com/AXP. I totally encourage you to put this out in as long a thesis as you think is required to do this. Okay. I think it can be put in like 50 words or less, but consider that like a challenge.
It would be in 50 words or less, or if I wrote it. How do we know if we know stuff?
We don't need to define terms. You just say here's what I think and why I think it. And I think that would be fine.
When we start with first-person consciousness, we can only conclude first-person consciousness, even if that first-person consciousness is beyond our own consciousness.
Sure.
How's that?
Yeah, I mean, we only can understand our own perceptions, and we have to accept everything else as tentative. And
the point is that if we are to accept the other things as well, that means they have to be first-person as well.
Except what other things?
Well, they don't have to be perceiving subjects, though, I guess is the thing. They can exist without being perceiving subjects, in my
Okay, at what point?
They have to be, but that's the thing though, because if they're not, or not being perceiving subjects, but if they're not more mental stuff, right?
What that means, that they're not more mental
stuff. And F in the conclusion rather than A, B, and C.
Yeah,
right?
Go ahead and put this at the blog where you have all the space in the world. And like I said, you'll need to have your first comment moderated if you haven't posted at the blog before. It takes a couple days. But we're going to have to move on, and I appreciate the call, so thanks very much.
Okay. By the way,
I swear I did not drop that. I did not drop that. He was dropped, and I did not touch that button. So anyway, my apologies to Johanna. I do not think I did that drop. I'm just saying, I take responsibility when I accidentally drop calls, and I do not think I did that. So if I did, or even if someone else did, I apologize, because I did not mean to cut you off when you were trying to.
If he's working on the Phylogeny Explorer project, then he already has an intimate connection to me anyway. So we can discuss this.
Well, and he can put it to our blog too if he wants other people to react to it or whatever. And I mean, I know he only got through a couple of the points, and
it really didn't look like she pushed a button.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, and so now we're going to move on to. It looks like John in California. You're on with Tracy and Aaron. Thanks for calling. It says here that the Bible is for your heart, not your head, and you have personal testimony on how prayer works because your wife was cured.
Oh my gosh, this is the Kirk Cameron circumvent.
Hey, he's on live.
I know, but it just.
How about a little kindness here to welcome John?
Let me just get up the sentence. It sounds like it's going to be, I'm predicting, the Kirk Cameron argument of circumvent the intellect.
Maybe, but let's let John tell us that. So go ahead, John, you're on the air.
Awesome. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing very well.
Doing well as well. So what's on your mind today?
Awesome. Well, what's funny is that I saw your Lake Elsinore post, and there's been people who've been asking for evidence and stuff, but I basically just want to share my personal testimony. I'll also turn you guys on to a resource that you guys can reach out to them and talk to them about this anytime you want. I'll tell you about the ministry where I had this done. It's really outrageous. But my wife was formally diagnosed with PTSD and fibromyalgia. And I don't know if you're familiar with fibromyalgia, but it's debated among doctors about what it really is.
Yeah.
Whether it's skeletal muscle, what no one really knows.
It's just pain, right? It's like weird pain that can't be explained.
Yeah.
Exactly. And whenever I would take my wife and my stepson to like Knott's Berry Farm or a theme park, or we try to go out to do something fun, her muscles would just flare up at random times and so forth. We didn't know what happened. And randomly, she would just have really spastic attacks out of nowhere. She'd have flashbacks and, from her childhood, because she had a really rough childhood of rape and abuse and, a number of different things. So we went to this man. His name is Brother Mike Smith. He has a ministry out in Phoenix, Arizona. He's a really successful psychiatrist, a secular one, for about 33 years, till he finally gave his life to the Lord. And now he has a healing ministry, and, he prays the way Jesus prays, the way he teaches out of Matthew. And I was really skeptical. I'm a minister now. I have a horse therapy program that I'm developing and so forth, and for autistic kids, military vets, and I'm a practical guy. I like tangible things because people can see it, feel it, experience it. It's real. So
okay. So what hospital does this faith healer work in?
I'm not sure what he has a private practice. I think he did, if I'm not mistaken. He's hardcorechristianity.com. His name is Brother Mike Smith.
I got to tell you that the words hardcorechristianity.com does not instill any confidence in me.
Well, I don't blame you. Hopefully this testimony will. Like I said, if you want to talk to all the family members.
I don't care about testimony. If he's healing people, then I'm going to see results. We will see, and this happened a number of times. I mean, people that go to work for the big faith healers, like Oral Roberts, for example. He had one of his security people said he just wanted confirmation that when these people come up in the wheelchairs and then they get healed and they walk off the stage, he wants confirmation that those people actually lived 4 years in those wheelchairs before they got up and walked off stage. He wanted documentation that these miracles were really happening. And eventually, of course, Oral Roberts finally concedes to give an answer and says, there's a lot of exaggeration in this business. Which tells me all I really need to know. apart from the fact that we don't have any documentation that anybody ever actually faith heals amputees or paraplegics, people that have, damage to the spinal cord and they're stuck in a wheelchair and then they suddenly get up and walk, that does not really happen from faith healers. So exactly what documentation do we have that any faith healer ever actually healed anybody?
Okay. Well, the premise of what you're saying right there is the problem. You see, because if we go by the word of the Bible, it's not...
Which we should not ever do.
Right. It's not Brother Mike that did the healing, it was Jesus.
Okay, so what documentation do we have that your favorite first century Palestinian rabbi ever healed anybody?
Wait a minute, I have a quick question, like a quick point, because I was married and my spouse at the time had a super, super advanced form of a very deadly form of cancer. And he went through the standard treatment and it failed. And we were told by the oncologist, I have nothing more to offer. And so we went into a research trial. And I just want to plug Angel Flights. Thank you so much for flying him to treatments for free. Volunteer pilots, you're awesome. And I also want to say that he went into that treatment at the University of Virginia. They had a research trial on cancer vaccines. And he survived, and he's more than 10 years out, and he is a cancer survivor now. Like he's at the, now this is well thank the oncologist, right?
Let's not make too hasty an assumption.
Now keep in mind that in his category of this particular cancer, there's like 10 to 20% survival rate, which means that 80 to 90% of the people that went into that trial were not expected to survive, assuming that the trial was, just testing and they didn't know that it would work. Now, people ask me all the time, so that trial saved his life, right? And I'm like, you know what? We don't know. We don't know because he had a surgery prior to the trial, and the trial was to stop another recurrence. And so maybe the surgery removed all the detectable cancer, and maybe that was all the cancer there was. So I don't know that that trial cured him. Even though he was in that trial and he survived and he had super low odds of survival, I don't know. I can't say the trial saved him. I can't say the vaccine saved him. Even with the vaccine now becoming the more standard treatment, I can't say that that's what saved his life. And here's the thing. I knew somebody else who had a spouse with a super low survival rate, which was more like 5%, and they went with an alternative medical solution, which at the time I kept, because I know that feeling of being completely desperate. And so they did what they felt like they had to do, and I just said, let them do something. Because if they go into the standard treatment, he's going to be sick in chemo, and he's probably not going to survive anyway. And if they do nothing, this person who's left is going to feel like I should have tried something, anything, even just some desperate choice.
Yeah,
but here's the thing, he died. But one of the things that she went for was that there were testimonials from people who didn't die who took this alternative treatment. The problem is the people who died aren't around to say it didn't work for me. The only people that you have left are the people who did survive, who are now believers because it cured them, is what they think in their heads. So the people who are left and survived it, you have to know how many people didn't survive it to make any kind of conclusions about what happened here, right? So how many people weren't, it's less important to me that you have a testimonial about how this helped your spouse than it is to know how many people went home and their spouses were just as bad or never got better, or it came back after a month and was just as bad. We don't have those people talking about it because they left. They left in non-belief.
Right. Well, that is the thing, and Scripture does touch on it. There are some people who get delivered, who get healed, and it does come back. And this is a very different...
Then they didn't get healed, did they?
Well, hold on. I want to touch on some things real quick, because you guys are super smart. So first
I'm not super smart.
You guys, I hear you guys talking. I was sitting in the back, hearing you guys talking about donuts and barbecue and all kinds of stuff, and just the conversation alone, the scale of the dialogue, you guys are very intelligent. I'm very honored to be on the show.
Takes brain cells to talk barbecue.
Right. And the other thing, too, is what I really want to preface this with is, first of all, Jennifer, thank you for being candid. Thank you for being vulnerable. We live in a culture to be vulnerable. You can get steamrolled by this world. So basically, and you may not agree with this, and that's okay. This is how I've come to peace with it, how I wrap my mind around it. Whenever I ask God for something, whenever I pursue healing through Him, God usually answers the prayer one of three ways. Number one, yes, it happens immediately, just like my wife. It hasn't come back. I have several witnesses. I can give you her number, and she'll most likely, because she's kind of mad at me right now, but most likely she'll give you, the personal medical information that verifies it's true. And like I said, Brother Mike Smith also has a lot of medical verification as well. You can email him at mike@hardcorechristianity.com. This isn't just some hocus-pocus thing that happens.
Okay, so there's a yes, there's a what else? A no?
So the first answer from God is yes, it happens right now. The second one is yes, but it's going to be a process. I've seen people go
so wait.
through chemotherapy.
And what is the means of falsification?
Wait a minute. No, I want to get this. Is there an option for a no?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's the best one. So the first one, yes, process. The third one is it's exceedingly abundantly above what you're asking for. If you remember the gospel, Martha went forward to Jesus.
Yeah, wait a minute though. We don't need to go into the gospel.
I don't need to know.
So what you're saying is when you ask God for help, you get a yes, a no, and a wait, right? Like it's a process.
No, wait. What I'm saying is you get a yes or no, or what you're asking for is not big enough.
What is the difference between asking God to help you and just letting crap happen? If the answer is sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes you apply some stuff for a while
and you
then
just accept that it's God's will no matter what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens if you do just regular crap and don't pray.
Now, the scientific approach would be that you would, if you have something that you think is going to be real and works, then you make predictions about how that works, right? And then there are ways to test it. And if there's ways to test that hypothesis, there has to be a way of potentially falsifying to show whether it's wrong. Now, you're never going to prove a hypothesis correct. But what you're trying to do is to determine if you're not correct. If what you imagine is not true, then how would you prove it false?
Right, but also I'm looking at like the person that had the 5% cure rate, right? Like my friend's husband who died. He had a 5% chance of survival if he went with the standard treatment, which would probably have made him super ill, and then he was probably going to die anyway. 95% chance of mortality. So right. I'm looking at that, and I'm saying there's a 5% success rate with the treatment that he would want to try, and a 95% fail rate. So what is the fail rate of this guy that you're promoting?
The fail rate? Well, that's, like I said, we're just touching the surface.
How many no's does he get? How many no's happen?
How many exceedingly abundantly above? Not very many. I'd probably say, if I had to look at the testimonies, probably 1 in 50.
I'm not looking at the testimonies because the testimonies are people who got good results. I'm saying, what are the rates of fail?
The testimonies are from the people who had the surgery to correct the issue and then thanked God instead of the doctors.
Right.
The testimony is meaningless. What data can we show?
Okay. I guess my question then deductively then would be what data satisfy your doubt, basically?
My problem, the reason I have doubt is that there's absolutely nothing.
No, what you do,
ever.
No, I can tell you how to do it, right? So you take a group of people who are suffering from this thing, and you take the standard treatment, and you compare what this guy is doing with these people to the standard treatment, and you say, hey, the people who were all professionally diagnosed with this, when they apply the faith healing, they are cured at a higher rate than are cured by the professional psychiatric industry of PTSD, or they are helped, or it's mitigated in ways that are like better than the standard treatment. That's how you test anything that is being challenged, that is challenging a standard treatment. So the question would be, have these studies been done? Not are there testimonials, but has he sat down and done like a group of people where it's like, here's what they were supposed to do. They've all rejected the standard treatment. They've come to me instead, and I'm going to faith heal them. Does he actually get a long-term result of cure or mitigation that is better than the treatment of the psychiatrist, not just in your opinion, but where has he published this? Where are the number of subjects and the number that were helped and the number that weren't helped?
Has it been tested?
And his conclusions as to why certain people weren't helped and why certain people were helped. I mean, he has to.
And what about the control group? What about the control group that prayed to the wrong God just to see how this experiment would work?
Right. So you guys are asking a lot of great questions. I got to try and take them one at a time.
Well, if you were putting forward a medicine and saying it works better than the standard treatment, you would have to test it in this way.
And what I was starting to say, but there's absolutely nothing ever to imply that a God ever interceded on anything. I mean, when you look at any vaccine, and the reason that any medicine works, if you get into the college level biology, they can explain how the medicine works, why it works. In a transfer of molecules level, how it works. But when we're talking about faith healing, we got nothing that makes any kind of intelligible sense. You just gotta believe in the right mythology. And you know what? The funny thing is, it doesn't matter which mythology it is. It doesn't matter which God you believe to, because people claim faith healing success for tantric magic.
Right. And I mean, that's going to be another problem, right? So, for example, let's say this guy prays over people and then they're healed. I don't know what his process is, but let's say that these people come in, he applies his process, and they actually are cured or it is mitigated more than the standard treatment. We still would have to demonstrate the process includes a God and that it isn't about what he's doing that is still working even without a God.
So you're talking about a guy who started out with a medical career in which we have public records for his success and failure rate in the way that he does treatment for people. And then he shifted from his training in a medical career to faith healing. Do we have the data that we can compare to see whether his success rate has actually improved? And I don't mean in testimonials.
Yeah, because the person who was doing the alternative medications, like the alternative, I think it was some kind of low chemo treatment, he claimed that he had, all kinds of testimonials too, but he had failed to produce that for Congress.
Yeah, with the people that go through reflexology.
And I just want to say, that was a special case. The guy had testified before Congress, and they told him, come back when you have more data. There was something going on with that where he did come and testify over some health issues, and so some people were impressed with that, saying oh look, he was prominent enough to come and testify before the Congress. And I'm like, yeah, I looked it up, and what they said was come back when you have data, and he never did.
Yeah, and then like Penn and Teller did this beautiful presentation where they run snail slime all over people's faces and tell people that it's going to cure them, or they attach magnets all over their bodies and a lot of these things are not even magnets. They're just lead weights that they strap to these people's bodies and tell them that they're magnets. And then the people will come back and say, well, yeah, I feel 100% better. You've completely cured me. And it's not even a magnet.
Well, that's the other thing, though. If you're doing some process like praying over somebody and then they get better, that doesn't demonstrate that a God got involved. You still have to demonstrate that process.
Exactly.
Is what you're claiming it is.
So, natural remission in the case of cancer or just hallucination in the case of placebo effects, we don't have anything to imply that any faith healer ever, not this guy or the imaginary first century Palestinian that he prays to, ever healed anybody. Nor could they have.
Well, like I said, he does. You can email him. He can provide you with that information. I have.
Why are you calling the show?
Yeah, he doesn't have to provide it to us. He has to provide it to groups like the National Institutes of Health. He has to provide it to groups like the World Health Organization. He has to provide it to groups where he can actually put this into implementable practice and actually help people in a large scale. He just has to show his data, and that would be acceptable. If he could show that what he's doing actually is better than standard treatment, it would be implemented. I guarantee it.
Okay, well,
even if there's no God, just if he was doing some weird mumbo jumbo and praying and whatever, or anointing, whatever, if it worked better than standard treatment, they would use it, even if they didn't understand the process.
Yeah, no, I just want to throw out one other little dimension on this. If magic was real, and that's what we're talking about right now with faith healing, we're talking about magic. Curses and blessings, these are both magical enchantments. If magic was real, then you would have people like Obi-Wan or Spock or Gandalf who would be able to walk up and demonstrate that. And even if we couldn't explain it, even if science could not explain it, Gandalf and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Spock would be able to demonstrate that this thing is real and it happens even if science can't explain it. But what we have consistently is people who are pretending and who do no better than the chance of rolling dice on a random chance. And that's all they have. The placebo effect at best, where people walk around with pieces of lead attached to them and they think they're magnets and now they think they're cured.
So what I'm hearing is that, and granted, I'm just asking, my wife getting healed of fibro, it being medically verified, being completely gone and being gone for over 2.5 years, you call it magic, not God.
No, I wouldn't call it either one.
I'd say it's unexplained.
Yeah, there are reasons.
And the thing is, with fibromyalgia, right, and with all pain, in fact, you have an issue of subjective measurement, right? So people basically say how much pain they have. So there are studies, for example, that show that acupuncture works really well for pain management. But you know what? Fake acupuncture works really well for pain management too. So it's interesting that sticking people with these acupuncture needles, even if you do it in ways that are not prescribed by actual acupuncture, still seems to work. So there's something going on there that we need to investigate that works, but it's not what acupuncturists believe it to be.
Sometimes it's just the amount of attention that you get. I mean, you can do the thing where they do the superheated cups and they do the suction on your back, right?
Yeah.
And you just feel that, and the same thing happens when you do, like my mother used to do.
But I think acupuncture is a great example, though, because it actually works at a pretty good rate. But the thing is, when you get the acupuncturist to use patterns that are not prescribed by acupuncture, it works at about the same rate.
Exactly what I'm saying. So like you go through a ritual of attention to somebody. You know, like when in my family, when any of the kids had a cold, we would you would do the Vicks Vapor Rub, whatever that's supposed to do. You know, you put the T-shirt in the oven like this.
How y'all want to pop up as soon as I'm about to get off?
Chicken soup, you know, has actually no chemical ability at all. But darn it makes you feel good, right? So now you get pampered a little bit. Now you feel a little better. And so people always attest that, yes, this helped cure me.
Or maybe it keeps you hydrated, right? And you say, like, oh, chicken soup really made them do feel better. And it's like, well, it kept them hydrated when they were throwing up, right? I mean, there's all kinds of, it's not necessarily the chicken soup is what helped them. It's just getting liquid into the person and trying to keep liquid down that might help. You know what I mean? I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying that even in a situation where you give them chicken soup and they actually feel better, they might just be hydrating.
So what I need to know is when somebody switches from an actual medical practice like the guy that you're talking about, he switches into a faith healing practice, I need to show that there's documentation of that.
Gotta get to work a little bit early on this Friday. Normally I only work half days on Fridays, but I got a mural project that I'm working on.
By which it can work.
So I gotta actually get some of my own personal supplies together.
Like PTSD and fibromyalgia.
I might even take some of these brushes with me.
Oh, now we're talking about things that can be treated in a homeopathic hospital.
But I'm just saying, it's like you can't see, here's the damage, and now the damage is fixed. You're relying on this subjective assessment, right? When you're dealing with pain management especially, and that's where I think they say that certain types of alternative treatments tend to do their best is when you're talking about pain management things where people have to gauge how well is this working or how much pain do I feel, and you're talking about a process that is a little bit different than there's a broken arm and then I did the faith healing and now it's not broken anymore. Like, does this guy bring back limbs that are missing?
Yeah, I remember this documentary about these pagan faith healers in sub-Saharan Africa somewhere.
Does he do more than like these pain things?
And they're able to cure all kinds of things just by running all of these chants and mantras and dances and things like that. And people, just declare that they're cured, but they're not Christian. So when you tell the Christian that these people are healing people,
sure.
Well, that's the devil's work. Well, how can it be the devil's work if it's healing people? But it's automatically rejected. So by the same bias, I'm going to automatically reject any claim that the Christian makes that, he knows this guy and you can email him and he'll tell you that he heals people. I'm sure he would tell me that he heals people if I were to email him. But if I want to see the data, it's not going to bear out that he's actually doing the deed.
Yeah, and it's not that we don't believe that your spouse feels improved. I mean, I think we totally would be willing to accept that your spouse went in not feeling well or even having a diagnosis of unexplained pain.
And then they smear her with snail slime or Vicks Vapor Rub or whatever, and then she comes out feeling great.
Snail slime, really?
Well, no, they did a show on that, so I think that's what he's referencing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like we could let you go on and do the testimonial, but it really wouldn't address the concerns, I think. I mean, I don't doubt that you have a testimonial. I just doubt that it has the weight that you would hope that it would have with
It doesn't have any weight with me. Yeah, it doesn't have any weight at all with me. I've seen people testify vehemently to things that they themselves recanted a moment later.
Well, and there's people who get spontaneous remissions from certain things like cancer. Some people are going to survive these weird, deadly forms of cancer for no explicable reason, whether they're praying or not.
But not spinal cord injuries or amputations. That never happens. You know why that never happens? Because God can't fix those things. Those are beyond his ability. The only things he can ever fix are things that could have naturally fixed themselves.
So you mean to tell me there's healing without a loving God?
No.
I am, because there's spontaneous remission, which is healing without a loving God. Yes, I will say that.
Yeah, well, the body can recover.
Rats have spontaneous remission in lab experiments. So I think that when you have, and I asked somebody this once because they were talking about miracles, and I said, well, is God performing miracles on these lab rats? Because some of them are getting, are not coming down with these illnesses or are getting cured of these illnesses even if they're not treated. I mean, even animals can have a spontaneous remission, and I don't think that every spontaneous remission is a miracle. I think sometimes people just get better for reasons we can't explain.
He also mentioned something else. He said a loving God. So we know we're not talking about the Christian God now.
Right. That's true.
I'm talking about Jesus.
Well, then, no, you said loving God, and that doesn't work. Because remember, Jesus was not the kind of guy you want to get medical advice from. Jesus was the guy that said that it doesn't matter what a man takes into his mouth. All
right. So I got some brushes. Might definitely need some more. Alright, let me grab some more supplies and get my ass up out of here. I'll holler at y'all later. Oh, wrong button.